Welcome back to the Coach's Corner, brought to you by Morph, for another in-depth coaching conversation. Each month, we sit down with top practitioners, Morph clients, and pioneers across the coaching ecosystem to explore the future of workplace coaching. Introducing your Morph hosts, Ali and Sebastian. Grab a seat. You are in.
Well, I'm just a grand old man that's been around for a very long time, and been fascinated by coaching and mentoring all that time, and just continue to find new things that are worth exploring and researching and developing good practice in.
David, for the audience that is not aware of what the EMCC is and what your role has been in founding it, could you introduce the EMCC for us a bit?
Absolutely. So the EMCC was the first of the professional bodies in this space to be established. In 1991, it was established as the European Mentoring Centre, on the basis that basically coaching in business and elsewhere didn't really exist. You had coaching in sport, and you had a few occasional coaches, but there was not enough numbers to make it an organised activity. And then by the end of the 1990s, the EMCC found that it got all these people suddenly appearing who called themselves coaches, who were saying, well, what we're doing is the same as what you're doing, or very similar to what you're doing. So there was an attempt, largely from the States, to try and put a difference between coaches and mentors. And so I said, well, mentors are directive and tell you what to do, and coaches don't. Whereas, of course, all the history of coaching is exactly the opposite. From the 80s, when the word was coined, all the way through to the late 1980s, coaching, particularly in business, was a highly directive form of tutoring or apprenticeship, and it's changed radically. Whereas mentoring, the history of mentoring all the way through, right from its beginning, was about using your wisdom to help somebody else become wise. And so what we basically said to these coaches was, come and join us. If we're doing something similar, come and join us. And that's why the whole thing came about. We changed the name to the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. I think it's quite fascinating that the work of the Coach Maturity Research Group in the last 4 or 5 years, looking at what distinguishes a mature coach from a beginner coach, identifies that the more mature a coach becomes, the more like a mentor they become, in the sense that they use their wisdom to help somebody else become wiser. They still don't direct, but they are able to ask better questions because they come from a point of knowledge themselves of the situation that the person's in. Mm-hmm. But also they give context, and context is information that helps you with the quality of your thinking. It's not the same as advice. Advice is doing the thinking for somebody. And so basically that's where the EMCC, that's where it came from, and it continues to hold those values right even today.
Yeah. Oh, and that is something I would love to pick in on, because EMCC has shaped the standards for coaching in Europe as they stand today. I'm curious, what principles from those early days remain the most essential for coaching, the coaching field today?
When we started everything in 1991, we were bringing together 3 audiences. We were bringing together people who were mentors and then coaches. We were bringing together people from organizations who were using them. And we were also bringing the academics who were studying the whole field. And that tripart alliance, if you like, looking at those 3 perspectives, remains an important part of the whole picture. So because we started in a university, an evidence-based approach was fundamental, and it remains so. And we weren't that interested in what somebody was decided that I do it this way, therefore that must be the best way of doing it. We basically said, what's the evidence? And so having a very strong evidence base. But also we recognise, because we started as a European institution, albeit in the UK, that different countries had different histories and different cultures, different ways of looking at things. The way that they do mentoring and coaching in Germany is not quite the same as it would be in France, or the same, or Ireland, or the States, or whatever. And so as EMCC has grown and expanded around the world, we can see this principle of there is no right way of doing it. It's basically that we work within the context, and that mentoring and coaching are contextual skills.
Awesome. Really cool. So I understand how it's going to be different from each culture, and that's a really great acknowledgement, because no place is the same and no conversation can be the same. But so then how would you define, or what ingredients define coaching culture that would then meet the EMCC level expectations, say even in smaller organizations?
Well, I think in a coaching culture, coaching becomes, or coaching or mentoring becomes a default method of conversation. They're not a nice to have. And so when you get faced with a challenge, what's the nature of the conversation that happens? Is it one where you explore things together, or one where you resort to command and control? That's one of the ways that you might see it. Also, we work on teams. It's been fascinating to see that in a high-performing team, people take collective responsibility for their own and each other's performance, learning, and well-being. Mm-hmm. And that applies to that across the organization. When people take that collective responsibility, it's a different way of being, a different way of thinking. And so these would be just some of the critical indicators that we would look for. Now, achieving a coaching culture is very, very difficult, to put it mildly. And we can't actually identify very many organizations that have been able to either, some have been able to create something of it, but it's easy to destroy it as well. And it needs a lot of things. And one of the things that we see in particular is where are the role models at the top? Because if the guys at the top are not behaving as coaches, or the chief executive is not coach in chief to the organization, it's never going to fully stick.
For sure. We in our work, we see that in order to establish a successful coaching culture, you essentially need different kinds of modalities of coaching. You need the leaders at the top, or leaders who coach, and whether that be at the C-level, but also line managers, like that should be a habitual conversational pattern. Internal coaches, really important as well. And even external coaches as well, to sometimes bring that fresh perspective. But what I'm so curious about is we work with organizations who have an interest in cultivating such a culture. We see a growing desire in companies in Belgium and in the Netherlands. Yet there is really a difference between achieving this genuine behavioral change and being stuck at the superficial or the surface level training. What makes you probably have an example in mind of a company who was really successful at cultivating such a culture? Aside from the coaching modalities and the top being included, what is needed? What are the success factors of?
Because the success factors of creating a coaching culture. Yeah. I think the role models at the top, as we've discussed, is an important part of it. But it's actually having a strategy as well. Mm-hmm. I'm doing an intensive 1-day immersion in coaching culture next year in January, where we're going to be taking people through all the components of a strategy. There are lots of them. It's about how you integrate coaching and mentoring together. And one of the things that we learned there is that if you want line managers to behave like coaches, you make them a mentor first, so that they can practice developmental behaviors or conversations on somebody from another team. So if they make a mess of it, there's less at stake. So they're more willing to experiment. We find that supervision is an important part of it as well. That people have something to go to when they get stuck. Measuring the quality of the coaching between a line manager and direct reports. Measuring the quality of externally provided coaches. Yep. Are they able to do it? Something like a coach development center inside the organization, where you basically observe people coaching, give them feedback, and then they create an action learning set so they can learn together to become more effective coaches. Or externally, a coach assessment center for external coaches. Now, we now know, we know from a number of organizations where we've had coach assessment centers, and we've been able to evaluate them on pretty robust criteria. And all we're not looking at, do they do a particular methodology or this way or that way? All we're looking for in those assessment centers was, can they hold a meaningful developmental conversation? Mm-hmm. Simple as that. Horrifically, consistently, 70% of the coaches who got their little bit of paper could not. Mm. And that's scary. Yeah. And one of the things that we saw is that they would still be based at a very basic level. They'd be grinding through the grow process, mm-hmm. and the grow model. And if the client says, well, I don't actually have a goal, they wouldn't know where to go or what to do. They actually try and force them, you must have a goal. What is it exactly? When they're actually not realizing that very often the objective of the coaching is to help the person find their goal. So having a robust coach assessment center where you can identify, can they coach, but also will they fit with our organization? So there's probably about 20 different things that we would see in a strategy, which will enable you to bring everything together so that the whole, you're making progress step by step. Where things go wrong, badly wrong, is when the organization says, we're going to have a coaching culture. So this year, we're going to focus on training a few line managers to be coaches. Well, it's not going to work because it's not integrated with the business objectives and other priorities. It's not going to work because if you just train the line manager to coach, it's like teaching somebody to do people to do the tango when only one of the people knows the steps. Yeah. The coachee needs investment too. So investing effort in teaching people how to be coached is just as important in teaching people to do coaching. So those are just some of the things that we would identify.
Yeah. Oh, that last part especially is striking to me, because in my work, in the work we do, sometimes you get across teams or individuals who feel like they not were forced to take on coaching, but for who coaching was assigned, or it was not their deliberate choice. And there's quite some resistance that you sometimes need to overcome, and you really need to take the time, right, to build that chemistry and to partner with the person. And that might take 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 sessions, even before you start doing some actual work together.
Absolutely. And going beyond that is the context in which the coaching is taking place. So that's part of the context. But one of the things that we've learned is that the sponsor, the person who's brought the coach in and says, will you coach this person? Very often they're doing this to say, well, I can wash my hands of this now. It's really my problem of managing this person, but now I'm giving it to you, the coach, and you can sort this person out. Mm-hmm. That's a recipe for disaster. So one of the things that we now recommend very strongly is that the coach, the sponsor, and the coachee sit down together, and one of the parts of the conversation are, so what are you as the sponsor going to do to create the conditions where the coaching is most likely to succeed? So we look at the system. So increasingly, effective coaching is a systemic process.
Nice, very nice, very nice. Maybe to conclude this section before we move on to a different theme we have in store for today. I remember from our previous conversation, you mentioned a very interesting sounding coach maturity level, 4 levels to measure. Without getting too much off track, does something like this also exist for coaching cultures in organizations?
Well, we in our original studies we found 4 levels, started at nascent and went all the way through to effective embedded. And what we see pretty universally when we ask people in organizations to fill out the little questionnaire around it is we don't see any organizations which are fully in the embedded. What we see is in most cases is a scattering of things where they're very nascent and things where things are embedded. But it's a very broad and fragmented picture.
Clear. I would love to paste a link to this resource in the show notes.
We could do that. Yes, we'll do that.
I think the audience would be really interested in listening or reading more about that. I know I do.
Yeah.
That will be done.
Perfect. So David, I heard you are very passionate about democratized coaching and internal coaching. So maybe we can start off with I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, and what does democratized coaching look like in the practice from the EMCC perspective?
The way that coaching has grown is been primarily about helping individuals and particularly leaders, people who can afford it effectively, to be able to change or to achieve a promotion or whatever. And that's fine. But what if you can't afford it? What if you're, my typical example, what if you're the head teacher of a rural school in Uganda, where the kids don't even have shoes, you're not going to be able to afford an expensive coach or even an inexpensive coach. And so we need to be thinking about how do we make this more widely available. And some of the things that we're doing there, we have a program which EMCC has supported, which is gradually getting ready to roll out. But the aim is to get 5 million school-age coaches and mentors. And the principle here is that if people can learn the skills of coaching and being coached at an early age, that's going to help them in their careers and their life in general. And we currently have, we're just wrapping up 2 experiments, one in Birmingham, England, with 10 to 12, and the mentees being 9 to 10. and two schools in South Africa in Cape Town, a rich school and a poor school linked together. So, and we're learning a lot from this. So we want to roll this idea out across across the world so that young people get those skills at an early stage. And then I think we need to think about a lot more volunteering for coaches. And so we're beginning to see the EMCC across the world has been very good at promoting pro bono coaching for people who will benefit from it, both coaching and mentoring. And so that that sense of we'll do the stuff that pays, but also we ought to be giving something back. And I often say, if coaching is all about helping one more overweight, balding, middle-aged, male, narcissistic executive get one level further up the ladder, is that really what we want to give to society?
Yeah, and where we were making the biggest impact.
Yes, exactly. And so we have to think about how we actually spread the impact. And we're making on. Team coaching helps because you're getting more value, you're hitting more people. And we can see coaching at higher levels, coaching teams of teams, coaching organizations. We see the impact that coaching will have on many people's lives. And I think we have to focus in the next decade or more on how do we widen the reach of coaching and mentoring.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I think this is part of the mission of Morph. Why we do what we do. Our impact will probably not be as profound as it is when democratized coaching reaches schools in Uganda. But we really truly believe that for the individuals at all levels of the organization, everyone is a performer. Everyone is looking to be successful, making the best out of their days, their careers. Everyone is looking to grow. But like you so accurately said, not everyone has access to it. And we like to think that we can change that. Now, we've mentioned something about leaders who coach, right? An important modality. In previous conversations, I've spent way too much time talking about what external coaches do and how they can help. Could you expand a bit on what internal coaching, how it can be a powerful tool for organizations when properly executed?
Well, the first thing to say is research by Rachel Jones in a seminal paper compared internal and external coaches. And what she found was that internal coaches actually marginally are more effective when they're properly trained and supported. And that's a big caveat. But in terms of their ability to have an impact in the organization, if they're properly trained and supported, they can be just as effective, and they understand the organization better than the external can.
I was about to ask you why is it that internal coaches might be more effective than the external ones? The first thing that came to mind was that must be institutional knowledge.
Understanding the culture is really important. Where the external coach comes into their own is at the senior levels, where the internal coach may lack the credibility or the courage to basically to tell the chief executive that they're an idiot. Whereas the external has more freedom to do that. Although fascinatingly, one of the things that's the phenomena that's been observed is called coach envy. It's quite fascinating. You get an executive coach, and they're coaching somebody from a large corporation who's very successful, or a very successful entrepreneur who's got a lot more money, and probably a better looking girlfriend, and all of these things that the coach does, and they feel envious, and so it actually the impact of that, it reduces their effectiveness.
Oh, I'm sorry. The coach is envious of the successful entrepreneur, and that makes it.
And it's one of those things. McKee and I a few years ago, we produced an article on taboo topics in coaching.
All right.
And that was one of the ones that Doug identified from his research.
Oh, amazing! Well, it sounds like a second resource to be shared in the show notes.
Yeah, I'd love to read that myself. That sounds very interesting.
Never heard of that before.
Yeah. Oh.
Hey, man. Go ahead, Ellie. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, one, I'm so interested in that topic in and of itself, but as we're talking about companies implementing coaching and those internal coaches being embedded in their teams, I guess what type of evidence or metrics can companies prioritize when measuring their impact of this type of culture as they're making these changes? How do they know that it's working?
So I think it depends what level you're looking at. So I'm going to use mentoring as because we have more data from mentoring. So we can very specifically identify that where you compare somebody who's got a mentor and somebody who hasn't, you have a 1/3 higher likelihood of keeping that person in the company or retaining that person over a period of time. Mm-hmm. There are some statistics relating to coaching, but they are less well evidenced overall. But nonetheless, there have been a variety of different studies over the years that show that having a coaching culture includes retention, it improves alignment to corporate strategy. So there's a whole range of benefits that you can see. When we're looking at what happens for the individual, that's an interesting. So we would tend to, for an individual, if they are, and with mentoring, you would look at their learning, their career progress. There's some enabling things like having a better career plan, and there's some emotional things like having greater self-efficacy. For coaching, you would add performance. Okay. As in the role. So you've got these very basic measures which you can use at the individual level. It's when you try and aggregate these up for the corporate level, it becomes more complex because there are more intervening variables.
Yeah. And if I were, imagine I am I'm an organization, I'm looking to start cultivating a coaching culture myself, right, for my people, but I'm not ready to work together with an external partner like yourself or like us. Where would I start? What would be the first thing that I would look into or invest in?
I think we always come back to purpose, and we have a cascade of purpose that's quite helpful to for people to work with. So, what's my purpose in life? Why am I here? What's my purpose in my in the task I'm doing right now? What's my purpose in my job role? What's the purpose of the team that I'm part of? What's the purpose of the team I'm part of in terms of the organisation that's it's nested within? What's the purpose of the organisation? How does that serve society, etc.? And actually looking at the cascade or the hierarchy of purpose, and then saying, well, what am I actually doing that's delivering those? And even at that bottom level, we find that people, when you really examine what how you're spending your time, how much your time is actually on stuff that really matters. And so you can start to focus, and then if you go beyond yourself through to the organization, but starting on oneself is a really good place.
I love that answer. It's very nice. A very nice place to start. It reminds me of a quote. He or she who has a strong why can achieve almost any how.
Yeah. Yes. That's nice. Yes. Yeah.
Now, I know I'm jumping back a little bit because there's a question that's burning for me, David, because you're talking about, you talked about like the taboo coaching things that you guys learned in some of those research papers. So I'm aware this is a little bit jumping topic slightly.
Fair enough. That's like a coaching conversation.
Absolutely. So I got to know, what sort of research questions, I guess, around coaching excite you personally most right now?
I think we're looking into team coaching in pairs. So you would typically have two team coaches with a large team. and there's a whole load of questions around this. Because the two of you are supposed to be demonstrating or role modeling teaming. How do you make sure you do that? Do you go to supervision together? And so one of our current studies is we've done a quick study. Now we want to do some deeper research into that. We've also set up a study recently looking at the ethics education in coaching.
All right.
So in most of the cases we've been able to see, pretty much all of them, the ethical element of coach education has been basically around the code of conduct and fairly thin, rather than actually creating an ethical awareness and ethical capability. The code of conduct can't really answer many things.
No. And can you tell us why that matters?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
Can you share with us why that matters?
I think because in my role as a supervisor, I see lots of really complex and difficult issues. And a lot of the time, if the coach had a really good ethical framework, a way of thinking about ethics, they would have, at the very least, identified the ethical issue earlier, and certainly sometimes come up with ways of tackling it that maintain their authenticity and their self-worth and so forth. But it's basically being able to analyze, is there an ethical dilemma here? So, is it actually sitting on top of you, but you've not noticed it? Which is so much so frequently is an issue. I mean, a classic case, you realize that the person that you're doing a discovery interview with, or a chemistry interview with, you realize that this person is seriously narcissistic, they bordering on sociopathic. And the probability is if they get the promotion thereafter to the next role, they are going to damage both the organization and the people around them. So here you are, but you're being paid to coach this person. Where are the ethics around that? Now, I'm not making any judgments here, but if you've got a strong ethical framework that you're working to, you can deal with this. But the codes of conduct are not going to help you with dilemmas like that.
A very interesting challenge that I feel like has landmines in and of itself. It's difficult to make your way through that in the best way. So if there was a guide, I think that would help many coaches in the future for sure.
Yes, I think. What I try and do, I mean, we actually run an ethical mentor program where we teach people to an ethical framework they can use, but that's only a small part of it. So in the research, we're trying to look at what would good practice look like in terms of good formal ethical education for coaches.
No, it's an excellent dilemma that is probably going to be on my mind for the rest of the day. It's tricky, and that's maybe also the interesting part about doing coaching work is that you get confronted with all these tons of big dilemmas or interesting, challenging situations that also force you to reflect and you to learn and to grow.
Well, I sometimes say, if you are not recognizing ethical dilemmas in your practice at least once every few months, then you are probably not coaching ethically.
That makes a lot of sense. We deal with people, and people all have their own situations and variables and challenges, and you're definitely going to find dilemmas or interesting situations that you get to help people talk and move through. And yeah, that makes sense that you would come into them at a frequency of like that often, for sure.
David, we're slowly getting to the end of our time together today, but before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you maybe a closing question. As the profession evolves, what would you hope to see from emerging European providers like Morph in their service offering, in their delivery in the next 5 years?
One of the key things we're seeing right now is the challenge from AI. So the AI can now already do basic level growth model type coaching, following a process better than most humans can. We provide value by who we are and our experience, our wisdom, and all the other things that we bring, but not by following the process. And so I think as providers, we have to enable the becoming of a coach rather than the doing of coaching, and maintain that separation. But we can also look at AI from the perspective of a really powerful partner, somebody who can learn with us, or an entity that can learn with us, that can point up to us things that we're not noticing in a coaching assignment, or help us to do our analysis to suggest things we should take to supervision. So there's lots of ways in which AI can be really helpful. And there are other new technologies too. I mean, we're meeting now on a video platform. It's not that far away before we will be able to move from beyond just virtual reality with all the clunky headsets and all that stuff to something much less intrusive that will basically give us a holographic session. So the three of us would actually be meeting in an environment that we choose.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes. Yeah. And we can choose something where the environment is conducive to the right kind of conversation. So I think working with AI is going to be one of the big areas that we have. But also, I think what we're seeing is that as the AI comes along, we need to leave behind that basic level coaching, because so much of it can be done by the AI. There's still roles for us in transformative coaching, in helping people live their dreams, and even to create their dreams. But in our levels of complexity, the 10 levels of complexity in coaching that we identify, at each level you're doubling or more the value that you're adding. And I think we can see coaching as something that is about adding increasing levels of value to society. And therefore, as providers, we add value to the coaches that work for us by helping them to add value to their clients. And I think it's that chain of value that becomes the critical element. And increasingly what we're seeing is a lot of the work of coaching, as you said, goes to internal coaches. And so it's that amalgam of both internal and external resources. How do we actually make them enhance the systems in which they happen? And it's that systemic perspective. In each of those levels of complexity, we're getting deeper and deeper into systems. So at the moment, we don't typically teach a lot of systems theory to coaches. That's something that I'm trying to change, because we're seeing that if you want to bring about change in an individual, you have to help that individual understand their internal and external systems so that they can bring about change. And that applies to them, then beyond them, to the team and the team of teams and so forth. So we have to become more systemically aware and more technology aware, but it's all there for the taking. There's no great magic about any of it. We can do it, but we have to be forward thinking.
Excellent. Let's leave it on that high note. David, thank you so much for being here with us for this really insightful conversation. Ali, thank you as well for, as always, for being part of this. Any last thoughts before we close off?
The one thing I'm fond of saying is, two things actually. One, if you're coaching, if you know where the coaching conversation is, you're not coaching. You're not coaching. Yeah, be there for discovery, and discovery is fun. And that's the other part, the other half of it. If it's not fun, why on earth are you doing it? I think the playfulness, the joy of effective coaching, effective supervision, that's what motivates. Certainly, what motivates me. But I think it should be a key motivator for everybody who's in this field. The joy of co-discovery, and to encourage it, and to be grateful for it.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, David. That's a beautiful sentiment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. In the world of coaching in organizations, often one of the most difficult places is finding out where to start. So if you are ready to implement coaching into your organization today, think about who are the people you would want to open this up to first. What are the first steps you would take? And we would love to hear where your beginning points are in the comments below. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Coach's Corner, brought to you by Morph. If today's conversation sparked something for you, a question, an idea, or even a request, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Curious to learn more about our work? Head over to morphorg.be to explore more. Until next time, let's keep rethinking what coaching can be and morph into a better you.